David Richardson sits in a luxury hotel room at 11:43 p.m., his wedding ring on the nightstand beside someone else's lipstick-stained glass, when the temperature drops 40 degrees in an instant. The woman who isn't his wife just left, and now, standing in the corner radiating impossible light, is a figure whose eyes hold both infinite mercy and a promise that makes David's blood run cold. You will feel every moment of pain you've inflicted on the woman who trusted you with her heart. You're probably wondering how a 42-year-old corporate executive with a beautiful wife, 2 kids, and a 7-figure salary ended up on his knees in a hotel room at midnight, face to face with Jesus Christ, about to experience 7 years of accumulated betrayal from his wife's perspective. Every lie, every affair, every moment she'd cried alone while he was with other women. Let me take you back to when David Richardson made a vow before God to love and cherish Sarah Richardson, and how, 3 years into marriage, he broke that vow and never stopped breaking it.
If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, pause this video. I'm putting resources in the description that could save a life.
Infidelity is called adultery in Scripture. It's listed among the 10 Commandments not as a suggestion, but as a fundamental law. You shall not commit adultery. Simple, direct, clear. But millions of people break this commandment every year, convincing themselves their reasons are valid, their situations are unique, their spouses don't understand them. They create elaborate justifications for betrayal, comfortable lies that let them sleep at night while their spouses cry themselves to sleep in beds that used to hold love, but now only hold deception. David Richardson was one of these people. For 7 years, he was 42 years old, a successful VP of operations at a Fortune 500 company in Chicago. He earned $600,000 annually. He lived in a $4 million house in Winnetka with his wife Sarah and their 2 children, Emma, age 12, and Jacob, age 9. On paper, David had everything: a successful career, a beautiful family, a wife who'd stood by him through career struggles, who'd raised his children, who'd built a home and a life with him. And for 7 years, David had systematically destroyed that life with serial infidelity. Not one affair, not a mistake, but deliberate, calculated, repeated betrayal. Affairs with co-workers, affairs with women he met at conferences, affairs with women he'd connected with through dating apps he'd downloaded specifically for cheating. 7 years of lying, sneaking, deceiving. Sarah Richardson was 39 years old, a former marketing director who'd left her career to raise their children. She'd been a devoted wife, faithful, supportive, loving. She'd believed in her marriage, trusted her husband, built her entire life around the family they'd created together. She had no idea that for 7 years, her husband had been living a double life, that business trips meant hotel rooms with other women, that late nights at the office meant affairs, that the man she loved and trusted was systematically betraying her while she slept alone, wondering why he'd grown so distant. This is the story of marital betrayal at its most calculated, of a husband who chose pleasure over integrity, excitement over commitment, lies over love, of a wife whose trust was weaponized against her, of children who were being raised in a home poisoned by deception. And it's the story of how Jesus Christ appeared in a Chicago hotel room at 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday night and did something that would destroy David Richardson's comfortable compartmentalization. He made David experience every moment of pain Sarah had felt, the loneliness, the rejection, the heartbreak, the slow erosion of self-worth that comes from being betrayed by the person you trusted most. This isn't a story about a moment of weakness. This is about systematic betrayal, habitual sin, and a man who'd convinced himself that his marriage vows were negotiable as long as his wife didn't find out.
Before we continue, if you believe in second chances and the power of faith, type restore in the comments right now. Let your voice be the spark of hope for a family in need. Show the world your faith in action.
David Richardson married Sarah Mitchell in 2008. He was 27, she was 24. They'd met at work both in marketing at a mid-sized consulting firm in Chicago. The chemistry was immediate. The relationship developed naturally. The proposal after 2 years felt right. The wedding was beautiful. Traditional church ceremony. Sarah in white, David in a tuxedo. vows spoken before God and 150 witnesses. I, David, take you, Sarah, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. This is my solemn vow. David meant those words. That day, he genuinely loved Sarah, genuinely intended to be faithful. The first 3 years of marriage were good. They bought a house. David got promoted. Sarah got pregnant with Emma. They were building the life they'd planned. Careers, family, future. Then, something shifted. David got promoted to director level at a new company. The job came with travel conferences, client meetings, extended trips, and on one of those trips, at a hotel bar in San Francisco, David met a woman, an attractive consultant, also traveling for work, also away from real life. They talked, flirted, had drinks, and David made a choice. He told himself it was just conversation, then it was just drinks, then it was just going back to her hotel room to keep talking, then it was crossing the line he'd vowed never to cross. The affair lasted one night. David flew home the next day, guilt crushing him. He was physically sick on the plane, nauseous with self-loathing, but he didn't confess to Sarah. He told himself it was a mistake. It meant nothing. Telling her would just hurt her unnecessarily. Better to bury it, learn from it, never let it happen again. This was the first lie, and it was the foundation for 7 years of systematic deception. Because David discovered something that night. He could do it. He could betray his wife, come home, kiss her hello, play with his daughter, and maintain the facade. The guilt faded after a few weeks. The fear of being caught diminished, and a dangerous thought formed. I can have both lives, the stable marriage at home and the excitement elsewhere. The second affair came 6 months later. Another business trip, another hotel bar, another woman. This time, the guilt was less intense. The rationalization came easier. Sarah and I have grown apart. We barely have sex anymore. I have needs. This isn't really cheating, it's just physical. The lies we tell ourselves to excuse sin are remarkably creative. By year 2 of the betrayal, David had developed a system. He'd created a separate email account for his affairs, downloaded dating apps on a second phone he kept hidden, learned which hotels had discreet entrances, mastered the art of lying fluently, looking Sarah in the eyes, and inventing detailed stories about business dinners that never happened, late meetings that were actually affairs. The affairs became routine. Not because David had stopped loving Sarah, he told himself he still loved her, but because he'd separated his life into compartments: family, David, faithful husband, loving father, and affair David, single man seeking excitement. He convinced himself these two identities didn't conflict. By year 7, 2022, David had had approximately 23 affairs. Some were one-night encounters, some lasted months. He'd slept with coworkers, conference attendees, women from dating apps specifically designed for married people seeking affairs. The arithmetic was devastating: 23 women, hundreds of lies, 7 years of systematic betrayal, and Sarah knew none of it, orked late frequently. He was on his phone constantly, texting and emailing, but he'd snap it shut when Sarah approached. Sarah had asked, dozens of times, "David, is everything okay? You seem distant." "I'm just stressed with work," he'd say. "Big projects, tight deadlines." "It's not you." She'd believed him, because she trusted him, because she'd vowed to trust him, because imagining her husband was capable of betrayal seemed impossible. But the signs were there. Lipstick on a collar he'd explained away as from a colleague's greeting at a conference. Hotel charges on credit cards he'd justified as work accommodations. Perfume scents that weren't hers. Sarah's friends had noticed too. "Is David having an affair?" her best friend Jessica had asked directly 2 years ago. "No," Sarah had said firmly. "David wouldn't do that. He's not that kind of man." But doubt had planted itself. And over the years, that doubt grew not into certainty, but into a painful question that Sarah pushed down constantly. "Is my husband betraying me?" She'd check his phone when he was in the shower, but he'd locked it with a passcode she didn't know. She'd look at credit card statements, but he'd switched to cash for most purchases. She'd ask about his trips, but his stories were detailed and consistent. The gaslighting was masterful. Whenever Sarah's intuition screamed that something was wrong, David would make her feel crazy for suspecting. "Sarah, I love you. I'm faithful to you. Why would you even think that? Do you not trust me?" The irony was devastating. The person least deserving of trust was using trust as a weapon against her, and so Sarah lived in a state of perpetual confusion. Her marriage felt hollow, but she couldn't prove why. Her husband seemed like a stranger, but she couldn't explain how. She felt lonely in her own home, rejected in her own bed, but when she tried to articulate it, David would dismiss it as her being too sensitive or overthinking. This is what long-term infidelity does to the betrayed spouse. It creates a reality where they know something is profoundly wrong, but have no evidence to prove it. It's psychological torture disguised as marriage. By November 2022, Sarah was quietly falling apart. She'd stopped sleeping well, had developed anxiety, had started therapy, where she'd say things like, "I think my husband might be having an affair, but I can't prove it, and maybe I'm just paranoid." She'd pray, "God, if David is betraying me, please reveal it. And if he's not, please heal whatever is wrong in our marriage." God heard that prayer, and he was preparing to answer it in a way that would expose everything and offer the possibility of redemption, but only if David chose it. David Richardson sat in room 1847 of the Palmer House Hotel in downtown Chicago. It was 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday. He wasn't traveling. He'd told Sarah he had a late client dinner. In reality, he'd met a woman named Jennifer, a marketing consultant he'd connected with on an affair dating app for dinner and drinks, then brought her back to this hotel room. The affair had been ongoing for 2 months. Jennifer knew David was married, she was married too. They'd both been explicit. No emotions, no strings, just physical satisfaction without the complications of relationships. Jennifer had just left, heading home to her own unsuspecting spouse. David sat on the edge of the bed, checking his phone for messages from Sarah. 2 texts. "Hope your dinner is going well. Kids are asleep. Love you." And 20 minutes later, getting worried. "Are you okay? Text me when you're on your way home." David typed quickly, "Sorry, honey. Dinner ran late, and client wanted to keep talking business. Heading home now. Love you too." The lie came effortlessly. 7 years of practice had made him fluent in deception. David was about to put his phone down when the temperature in the hotel room suddenly dropped. Not gradually, instantly, like someone had opened a door to a freezer. David's breath became visible in the air. Frost formed on the windows. What the hell? David stood up, reaching for the thermostat. But before he reached it, he felt it. A presence. Undeniable, overwhelming. Someone, something, was in the room. David spun around, his heart racing, every instinct screaming danger. The corner of the room near the window was glowing, not reflecting light from outside, generating light from within. Golden, warm light that seemed to emanate from the air itself, growing steadily brighter, more intense, more impossible. David's rational mind tried to process it. Hallucination? Heart attack? Am I dying? But even as he thought it, he knew this was real, more real than anything he'd ever experienced. The light took form. A figure emerged, a man dressed in simple white robes that seemed woven from light itself. His face held both infinite compassion and absolute authority. His eyes were ancient, knowing, seeing everything, including every sin David had committed in this room and in 23 other rooms over 7 years. David knew immediately who this was. Despite not having attended church regularly since his wedding, despite building his life on secular success and hidden sin, he knew. "Jesus," David whispered, his voice barely audible. "Yes, David Richardson," the figure said, and his voice filled the entire room despite being spoken softly. "I am Jesus Christ, the one you invoked when you made marriage vows, the one Sarah prays to every night, asking me to either heal your marriage or reveal your betrayal. The one who's been watching you destroy your wife's heart for 7 years while you pursued pleasure." David's legs went weak. He stumbled backward, sitting hard on the bed where, minutes ago, he'd been with another woman. "This isn't real," David said automatically. "This is stress or guilt, or this is judgment," Jesus interrupted, his voice carrying weight that made the air feel heavy. Judgment that I've delayed for 7 years while Sarah prayed for you. Judgment that's finally here because you've had countless chances to repent and you've chosen betrayal every single time. He moved closer, and David wanted to run, but found himself paralyzed, not by physical restraint, but by the sheer authority radiating from this presence. "Do you know why I'm here?" Jesus asked. David shook his head, though terrible suspicions were forming. "I'm here because tonight, Sarah prayed something different. For 7 years, she's prayed for your heart to change. But tonight, broken and alone while you were with another woman, she prayed, 'God, I can't live in this confusion anymore. If he's betraying me, please reveal it. Show me the truth, whatever it costs.'" Jesus' eyes bored into David's. "So tonight, I'm revealing truth, but not to Sarah, not yet. First, I'm revealing it to you in a way you can't ignore, can't rationalize, can't compartmentalize. David Richardson, you're about to experience every moment of pain you've inflicted on your wife over 7 years. Every lie, every betrayal, every time she cried herself to sleep, every moment of loneliness, every drop of self-worth you've eroded. You're going to feel it all from her perspective." "No," David begged, terror overwhelming him. "Please, I'll change. I'll confess to Sarah. I'll end all the affairs. Just please don't make me." "You've had 7 years to change," Jesus said firmly. 7 years of conviction. 7 years of chances. You've chosen sin over repentance every single time. Tonight, you don't get to choose. Tonight, you experience consequences. Jesus extended his hand toward David's forehead. David tried to pull away, but it was impossible. The moment those fingers touched him, the hotel room disappeared.
If this moment is touching your heart, share your story or a prayer request in the comments below. Someone watching may need the encouragement only you can give. Tag a friend who could use this message of hope today.
David found himself transported spiritually into Sarah's experience, seeing and feeling everything from her perspective. The first sensation was confusion and hurt. David was experiencing a night from 3 years ago, their 10th wedding anniversary. He felt Sarah's excitement preparing for the evening. She'd made reservations at the restaurant where they'd had their first date. She'd bought a new dress. She'd arranged for the kids to stay with her parents. She'd been looking forward to this for weeks, a chance to reconnect with David, to rebuild the intimacy that seemed to have faded. Through Sarah's eyes, David watched himself come home late by 2 hours, watched himself make excuses. "Sorry, honey, meeting ran over. You know how it is." From Sarah's perspective, David felt the crushing disappointment, the effort she'd put in, the hope that had built up and then deflated, the growing suspicion that he didn't care. But worse than disappointment was what came next. Through Sarah's senses, David smelled perfume on his clothes, not her perfume. Saw lipstick on his collar, felt the sick realization forming. He wasn't at a meeting, he was with someone else. Through Sarah's heart, David felt her desperate attempt to rationalize. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe that's just from a colleague's greeting. But deeper down, she knew. And David felt that, knowing the terrible certainty that fights against desperate hope, the intuition that screams truth while the mind begs for it to be false. That night, after their subdued anniversary dinner, Sarah had cried in the bathroom while David slept. David experienced those tears from the inside, the grief, the betrayal, the erosion of trust, the loneliness of being married to someone who felt like a stranger. The vision shifted rapidly, showing moment after moment. 2 years ago, Sarah discovering hotel charges on a credit card, asking David about them, watching him lie fluently. Company conference, "They haven't reimbursed me yet." Feeling the gaslighting as he made her feel crazy for questioning. The slow death of trust. 18 months ago, Sarah initiating intimacy, trying to reconnect physically with her husband. David rejecting her. "I'm tired, honey. Long day." Through Sarah's perspective, David felt the rejection like a knife, the feeling of being unwanted, undesirable, replaced. The questions that formed: what's wrong with me? Why doesn't he want me anymore? Is there someone else? 1 year ago, Sarah finding a text notification on David's phone before he'd learned to hide them better. A woman's name. Last night was amazing. Confronting David, watching him lie. That's a colleague talking about a work presentation. Don't be paranoid. Feeling him weaponize her trust against her. Sarah, if you don't trust me, we have bigger problems. The gaslighting was devastating. David felt from Sarah's perspective how she'd questioned her own sanity, her own intuition, her own worth. 6 months ago, Sarah overhearing David on the phone in his car, talking in a tone he never used with her anymore, warm, flirtatious, engaged, watching him quickly end the call when he saw her, asking who he was talking to, hearing the lie, just a client, scheduling a meeting, feeling the certainty that he was lying combined with the inability to prove it. Each memory was a wound, and David felt every single cut from Sarah's perspective. But the most devastating memories weren't the affairs themselves, they were the erosion of Sarah's self-worth. David experienced Sarah looking at herself in the mirror, after another rejection, after another distant conversation, after another night sleeping alone, while David claimed to be working late. He felt her thoughts. What's wrong with me? Am I not attractive anymore? Am I boring? Is this my fault? If I were prettier, skinnier, more interesting, would he still want me? The self-blame was crushing. Sarah had internalized David's betrayal as her failure. His rejection of her had become her rejection of herself. David felt Sarah's prayers desperate, heartbroken prayers. God, what's wrong with my marriage? What's wrong with me? Please help David love me again. Please fix whatever I'm doing wrong. The prayers broke David because Sarah wasn't doing anything wrong. David was destroying her, and she was blaming herself. The vision shifted to something David hadn't considered, how his betrayal affected Emma and Jacob. He experienced a moment from his daughter Emma's perspective, age 12, noticing things adults thought she didn't notice. Emma had overheard her mother crying in the bedroom multiple times, had seen her father being cold and distant, had felt the tension in the house that her parents thought they were hiding. Through Emma's heart, David felt her confusion and fear. Why is Mom always sad? Why does Dad seem angry all the time? Are they getting divorced? Is our family falling apart? Emma had started having fiders, anxiety attacks at school. Her grades had dropped. She'd become withdrawn, because children feel the fractures in their family even when no one explains them. David experienced a moment where Emma had asked Sarah directly, "Mom, do you and Dad still love each other?" Through Sarah's perspective, David felt her desperate attempt to protect their daughter. "Of course, honey. Dad and I love each other very much. We're just stressed with work." The lie to protect the children, the burden Sarah carried alone, the damage being done to Emma and Jacob by the poison in their parents' marriage. Jesus showed David the wider consequences, how his sin rippled outward, affecting everyone around them. Sarah's friendships had deteriorated because she'd withdrawn, ashamed of her failing marriage, unable to be honest about what she suspected. Sarah's mental health had declined: depression, anxiety, insomnia. She'd started taking medication, seeing a therapist, spending money they didn't have on counseling for problems David was creating and denying. The family's spiritual life had collapsed. Sarah had stopped going to church, too ashamed to face people when she felt like a failure as a wife. The kids had stopped going. The family that had once attended services together now stayed home in broken silence. David saw himself through objective eyes, how he appeared to others who knew the truth. Jennifer, his most recent affair partner, had told her friend, "Yeah, he's married with kids. But whatever, it's just physical. His wife probably doesn't care." The casual dismissal of Sarah's and the scream, humanity. The reduction of David's family to an inconvenience rather than sacred trust. David saw hotel staff who'd known exactly what was happening, the married man checking in with different women, never his wife. The contempt in their eyes even as they maintained professional courtesy. He saw coworkers who'd known about his affairs and lost respect for him, who'd wondered, if he'll betray his wife like this, how can we trust him in business? The vision showed David what he'd become, a man whose word meant nothing, whose vows were empty, whose character was rotten beneath a polished surface. David saw Sarah discovering definitive proof of his affairs, finding the second phone, reading the messages, seeing the hotel charges, the photos, the evidence of 7 years of systematic betrayal. He experienced Sarah's devastation, not from his own perspective but from hers, the collapse of everything she'd believed, the death of trust, the realization that her entire marriage had been a sal's lie. He watched the divorce, watched Sarah broken, unable to trust again, watched Emma and Jacob torn between parents, damaged by their father's choices, watched himself lose his family not through tragedy but through his own deliberate destruction. He saw Emma at age 25, in therapy, unable to form healthy relationships because her father had taught her that men betray and lie. Watched Jacob at age 22, repeating his father's patterns, having affairs, treating women as disposable because that's what he'd learned at home. The generational damage was devastating, but Jesus showed him an even darker alternative. What if Sarah never found out? David saw himself continue the pattern. More affairs, more lies. Sarah slowly dying inside, her spirit crushed, her joy eroded, living in a marriage that looked successful from outside but was poison inside. He saw Sarah at age 50, 60, 70, having spent her entire adult life married to a man who'd betrayed her, constantly, who'd stolen her youth and her trust and her joy. He saw her die never knowing the full truth but carrying the weight of suspicion her entire life. And then he saw beyond death standing before God's judgment seat. David Richardson, what did you do with the wife I gave you? The woman who trusted you, who bore your children, who built her life around the family you created together. You vowed before me to love and cherish her. You broke that vow not once, but thousands of times over 7 years. You destroyed her trust, eroded her self-worth, poisoned your family, and you never repented. Future David tried to justify, but I provided for them financially. I never left my family. I kept the marriage together. You kept a hollow shell together, came the response. You provided money while stealing her dignity. You stayed physically while abandoning her emotionally and spiritually. You committed adultery, breaking one of my fundamental commands repeatedly, deliberately, without remorse. Depart from me. I never knew you. David watched his future self, realized too late that he'd traded his soul for sexual pleasure, that he'd destroyed the people who loved him most for momentless gratification, that all the affairs, all the excitement, all the deception had led to eternal judgment and loss. The vision ended abruptly. David was back in the hotel room, on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I destroyed her, David gasped. I've been destroying her for 7 years, and she still doesn't know she's at home right now, thinking I'm at a business dinner, wondering why her marriage feels empty, blaming herself for my betrayal. Jesus knelt beside him. Yes, Sarah has carried the weight of your sin without knowing its source. She's questioned her worth, her attractiveness, her value, all because you've rejected her repeatedly while making her think the problem is her. How do I fix this? David wept. How do I possibly make this right? By choosing truth over comfort, Jesus said. By confessing everything to Sarah, every affair, every lie, every betrayal. By accepting the consequences of your choices. By understanding that she may leave you. And if she does, it's justice, not tragedy. She'll divorce me, David said, fear mixing with shame. Perhaps, Jesus agreed. You've given her biblical grounds 1,000 times over. Adultery is the one exception I gave for divorce. If Sarah chooses to end this marriage, she's within her rights legally, morally, and scripturally. He placed both hands on David's shoulders. But David, if you confess tonight, if you genuinely repent, there's a possibility, not a guarantee, but a possibility that Sarah may choose forgiveness, that your marriage may be rebuilt on honesty instead of lies, that your family may be healed instead of destroyed. And if she doesn't forgive me, then you accept it, Jesus said firmly. You don't get to betray someone for 7 years and then demand forgiveness. You confess because it's right, not because you're guaranteed a specific outcome. You tell the truth because deception has poisoned everything. And then you let Sarah decide what she can live with. Jesus began to fade, his form dissolving into light. Go home now, his voice echoed. Confess everything. Don't minimize. Don't trickle truth. Don't protect yourself. Tell her all of it, and then accept whatever she decides. Your marriage may end tonight. But David, what you've had for 7 years wasn't a marriage. It was a lie. Truth may destroy it completely, but it's the only foundation on which something real could possibly be rebuilt. And then he was gone, leaving David alone on the floor of the hotel room, but not the same David who'd been there an hour earlier. That David, comfortable in his double life, was dead. This David, broken, ashamed, but finally facing truth was new. David didn't go home immediately. He sat in the hotel room for another hour, trying to find the courage for what he had to do. He thought about texting Sarah to say he'd be late, but that would be another lie. And Jesus had been clear, no more lies. At 1:15 a.m., David drove home to Winnetka. The house was dark except for the porch lights Sarah always left on when he was out late. He sat in the driveway for 10 minutes, his hands shaking, his heart pounding. This was it. Once he confessed, everything would change. His marriage, his family, his life, all of it, might end in the next hour. But continuing the lie was no longer possible. Jesus had shown him what he'd done, made him feel it from Sarah's perspective. David couldn't unsee that, couldn't unfeel it. He walked to the front door, his legs weak, used his key, entered quietly. Sarah was sitting in the living room in the dark, waiting. She turned on a lamp when she heard him enter. "David, it's after 1 a.m. Your text said you'd be home around 11. I was worried." David looked at his wife, 39 years old, still beautiful despite the stress he'd put her through, wearing her robe, her eyes red from crying. "Have you been crying?" David asked. Sarah looked away. "I'm just tired. It's been a long day." But David knew the truth now. She'd been crying because she'd spent another evening alone, wondering why her husband was distant, why her marriage felt empty, why she felt so lonely in her own home. "Sarah," David said quietly, "we need to talk. Now. Tonight." Something in his voice made Sarah's expression shift from confusion to fear. "David, what's wrong? Are you sick? Did something happen?" "Sit down," David said. "Please." Sarah sat on the couch, her hands trembling slightly. David sat across from her in the armchair, maintaining distance because what he was about to say would put distance between them anyway. "Sarah, I need to tell you something, and after I tell you, you're going to want me to leave. You might want a divorce, and if you do, I understand. I deserve it." "David, you're scaring me. I've been having affairs," David said, the words coming out in a rush before he could stop them. "Not one affair. Multiple affairs. For 7 years. Since 2015. With coworkers. With women I met at conferences. With women from dating apps. I've betrayed you. Repeatedly. Systematically. For our entire marriage, basically." Sarah's face went white. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "Sarah, stop," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "Just stop. You're telling me you've been cheating on me for 7 years? "Yes, 7 years. Our entire marriage? Not quite entire. The first 3 years were faithful. But since 2015, yes." Sarah stood up, pacing, her hands shaking. "How many affairs?" 23. Sarah made a sound like she'd been punched. 23? 23 women? "Yes. And you're telling me this now because why? You want a divorce? You fell in love. With someone else?" "What?" "No," David said. "I'm telling you because tonight, in a hotel room, Jesus Christ appeared to me." Sarah stared at him. "What?" "I know how that sounds. But Sarah, he appeared, after I'd been with another woman. And he showed me, he made me experience what I've done to you, from your perspective. He made me feel every moment of pain, every lie, every betrayal. I felt your loneliness, your self-doubt, your heartbreak. Sarah, I destroyed you. And you didn't even know the full truth of what I was doing." Sarah was crying now, but they weren't the confused, frustrated tears she'd cried before. These were tears of devastating realization, all her suspicions confirmed, all her intuition validated, all the lonely nights given context. "So you're telling me," Sarah said through tears, "that for 7 years, when you were distant, when you rejected me, when you made me feel crazy for suspecting something was wrong, you were actually betraying me the entire time?" "Yes. And all those times I asked if something was wrong, if you were having an affair, and you made me feel paranoid you were lying to my face?" "Yes. And while I was crying myself to sleep, wondering what was wrong with me, why my husband didn't want me anymore, you were in hotels with other women." "Yes." David was crying now too. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I know that's completely inadequate. I know sorry doesn't fix this, but I need you to know I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. I betrayed you. I lied to you. I gaslit you. I destroyed your trust, and you didn't deserve any of it. Sarah collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Why? Why did you do this? What did I do wrong? Nothing, David said firmly. Sarah, you did nothing wrong. This isn't about you. It's about me, my selfishness, my entitlement, my sin. You've been a faithful, loving wife. I'm the one who destroyed our marriage. They sat in terrible silence for several minutes. Finally, Sarah spoke. Do the kids know? No, they don't know anything. But they've been affected, haven't they? They've felt the tension, the distance, Emma's anxiety, Jacob's behavior problems. That's all because of what you've done. Yes, David admitted. Jesus showed me that too. How my sin has damaged them, even though they don't know the details. Sarah looked at David with an expression of profound betrayal and devastating grief. I trusted you. I built my entire life around this marriage. I gave up my career to raise our children. I've been faithful, devoted, supportive, and you've been betraying me the entire time. I know. Get out, Sarah said quietly. Sarah, get out of this house, she repeated, her voice rising. Right now, I can't look at you. I can't be near you. I need you gone. Okay, David said, standing. I'll go to a hotel. But Sarah, before I go, I need to tell you that I'm done with that life. I'm ending all of it. I want to rebuild our marriage if you'll let me. I know I don't deserve it. I know you have every right to divorce me. But if there's any possibility... Right now, Sarah interrupted. I don't know what I want, except for you to not be here. Go. We'll talk tomorrow when I can think clearly. David left, driving back into the city, checking into a different hotel, the Hyatt this time, not the Palmer House where he'd met Jennifer hours ago. He lay in the hotel bed, unable to sleep, his life in pieces around him. But despite the pain, despite the fear of losing everything, he felt something he hadn't felt in 7 years. Peace. Not happiness, not comfort, but peace that came from finally living in truth instead of lies. David stayed in the hotel for 3 days. Sarah called on the 3rd day. I've spoken with a lawyer, she said, her voice flat and emotionless. I'm filing for divorce. The grounds are adultery, which is legally sufficient. I'll be seeking primary custody of Emma and Jacob, child support, and alimony. You'll have supervised visitation until I'm confident the kids won't be exposed to your affair partners. Sarah, please. I'm also telling Emma and Jacob the truth, she continued. Age-appropriate versions, but I'm not lying to them anymore. They deserve to know why our family is falling apart. And David, it's falling apart because of you, not me, not them. You. I understand, David said, though the words felt like death. Sarah, I know I have no right to ask anything, but is there any chance, any possibility that we could try counseling, that we could work toward rebuilding? There was a long silence on the other end. I don't know, Sarah finally said. Right now, I feel like everything we've had for 7 years has been a lie. How do I trust you? How do I believe anything you say? You've lied to me thousands of times. You've looked me in the eyes and deceived me fluently. Why should I believe you're different now just because Jesus supposedly appeared to you? Because I'm willing to do whatever it takes, David said. Full transparency, you can have access to my phone, my email, my location at all times. I'll go to counseling, individual and marriage. I'll tell our church what I've done. I'll accept whatever consequences you decide. Sarah, I destroyed our marriage. But if there's any chance to rebuild it on honesty, I want to try. Why now? Sarah asked, her voice breaking. Why are you willing to change now after 7 years? Why wasn't I worth being faithful to before? The question shattered David. You were always worth it. This isn't about your worth, it's about my failure. I convinced myself I could have both lives. I compartmentalized. I lied. To myself, as much as I lied to you. But Sarah, Jesus made me feel what I did to you. He made me experience your pain from your perspective. And I can't unsee that. I can't go back to being the person I was. That David is dead. I don't know if I can forgive you, Sarah said honestly. I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I even want to try. I understand, David said. But will you at least meet with a Christian marriage counselor? Just once? If after that you still want to proceed with divorce, I won't fight you. But please, Give me one chance to show you I'm serious about change. Sarah was quiet for a long time. One session. This Saturday. I'll find a counselor. You'll show up, and you'll be completely honest about everything. Every affair, every lie, all of it. And then I'll decide. Thank you, David said, hope and terror mixing. Sarah, I love you. I know I've done a terrible job of showing it. But I do. Don't, Sarah said sharply. Don't tell me you love me. Not right now. Show me if you love me. Through actions, not words, because your words have meant nothing for 7 years. She hung up. Saturday came. David and Sarah met at a Christian counseling center. The counselor, Dr. Patricia Monroe, was a 60-year-old therapist who specialized in infidelity recovery. The first session was brutal. Dr. Monroe had David recount the full scope of his betrayal, 23 affairs over 7 years, the systematic lying, the gaslighting, the manipulation. Sarah sat across from David, listening, occasionally asking clarifying questions that were like daggers. Was it always hotels, or did you bring women to our house? Always hotels. Did you use protection, or did you expose me to STDs? I used protection, but I got tested this week. I'm clean. I have the results. Did any of your coworkers know? Some suspected. So people at your office knew you were betraying me while I looked like an idiot at company events? Yes. Each answer was devastating. Each question revealed new layers of betrayal Sarah hadn't even considered. After 2 hours, Dr. Monroe stopped the interrogation. Sarah, I want to be clear with you. What David has done is among the most severe betrayals I encounter in my practice. 7 years of systematic infidelity with 23 different women isn't a mistake, it's a pattern. You have every biblical and legal right to divorce him. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. However, Dr. Monroe continued, I also want you to know that I believe David's repentance is genuine. I've worked with hundreds of unfaithful spouses. Many come to counseling to manage appearances or reduce consequences. But David's confession, unprompted by discovery, motivated by genuine conviction, is rare. That doesn't mean you're obligated to forgive him, but it does mean there's a foundation for potential restoration if you choose that path. What would that path look like? Sarah asked. Brutal honesty, Dr. Monroe said. Complete transparency. David would need to give you full access to all communication. He'd need to end his current job if coworkers were involved. He'd need individual counseling to address the character issues that made this possible. You'd both need intensive marriage counseling, probably weekly, for at least a year. And Sarah, you'd need to be willing to forgive, not immediately, but eventually. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing. It means releasing the debt so you can both move forward. Can a marriage survive this? Sarah asked. Some do, Dr. Monroe said honestly, but it requires both parties to be fully committed. David has to do the work of becoming trustworthy. And Sarah, you have to do the work of learning to trust again, which is infinitely harder. The statistics aren't encouraging. Most marriages with this level of betrayal end in divorce. But some don't. Some become stronger than they ever were, precisely because they're rebuilt on truth, instead of comfortable lies. I need time, Sarah said. I need to think, pray, decide what I can live with. That's completely appropriate, Dr. Monroe said. David, while Sarah is deciding, you need to be doing the work regardless of outcome. Individual counseling, full confession to your church leadership, making amends where possible, becoming the man you should have been all along, not to win Sarah back, but because it's right. Saturday came. David and Sarah met at a Christian counseling center. The counselor, Dr. Patricia Monroe, was a 60-year-old therapist who specialized in infidelity recovery. The first session was brutal. Dr. Monroe had David recount the full scope of his betrayal, 23 affairs over 7 years, the systematic lying, the gaslighting, the manipulation. Sarah sat across from David, listening, occasionally asking, clarifying questions that were like daggers. Was it always hotels, or did you bring women to our house? Always hotels. Did you use protection, or did you expose me to STDs? I used protection, but I got tested this week. I'm clean. I have the results. Did any of your coworkers know? Some suspected. So people at your office knew you were betraying me while I looked like an idiot at company events? Yes. Each answer was devastating. Each question revealed new layers of betrayal Sarah hadn't even considered. After 2 hours, Dr. Monroe stopped the interrogation. Sarah, I want to be clear with you. What David has done is among the most severe betrayals I encounter in my practice. 7 years of systematic infidelity with 23 different women isn't a mistake, it's a pattern. You have every biblical and legal right to divorce him. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. However, Dr. Monroe continued, I also want you to know that I believe David's repentance is genuine. I've worked with hundreds of unfaithful spouses. Many come to counseling to manage appearances or reduce consequences. But David's confession, unprompted by discovery, motivated by genuine conviction, is rare. That doesn't mean you're obligated to forgive him, but it does mean there's a foundation for potential restoration if you choose that path. What would that path look like? Sarah asked. Brutal honesty, Dr. Monroe said. Complete transparency. David would need to give you full access to all communication. He'd need to end his current job if coworkers were involved. He'd need individual counseling to address the character issues that made this possible. You'd both need intensive marriage counseling, probably weekly, for at least a year. And Sarah, you'd need to be willing to forgive, not immediately, but eventually. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing. It means releasing the debt so you can both move forward. Can a marriage survive this? Sarah asked. Some do, Dr. Monroe said honestly, but it requires both parties to be fully committed. David has to do the work of becoming trustworthy. And Sarah, you have to do the work of learning to trust again, which is infinitely harder. The statistics aren't encouraging. Most marriages with this level of betrayal end in divorce, but some don't. Some become stronger than they ever were, precisely because they're rebuilt on truth instead of comfortable lies. I need time, Sarah said. I need to think, pray, decide what I can live with. That's completely appropriate, Dr. Monroe said. David, while Sarah is deciding, you need to be doing the work regardless of outcome. Individual counseling, full confession to your church leadership, making amends where possible, becoming the man you should have been all along, not to win Sarah back, but because it's right. For 6 weeks, David and Sarah lived separately, while Sarah decided. During that time, David moved into a small apartment, giving Sarah and the kids the house. He confessed to his pastor and church leadership, submitting to discipline that included stepping down from all ministry roles and attending a men's accountability group focused on sexual integrity. He quit his job. Too many coworkers had been affair partners or had known about his betrayal. He took a lower-paying position at a different company, accepting the financial consequences. He attended individual counseling twice weekly, working through the character issues that had made serial infidelity possible: entitlement, selfishness, compartmentalization, lack of empathy. He told Emma and Jacob an age-appropriate version of the truth. Daddy made very serious mistakes that hurt Mommy. Daddy betrayed Mommy's trust. That's why I'm not living at home right now. But I'm working hard to become a better person, and I hope someday Mommy can forgive me. Emma, at 12, understood more than Jacob. Did you cheat on Mom? She asked directly. Yes, David admitted, many times, and I'm so sorry. You deserved a better father than that, Emma cried. How could you do that to her? Mom is amazing. She's done everything for us. You're right, David said. Your mom is amazing, and I was incredibly wrong. I'm sorry you have to know this about me, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life being the father you deserve. The weeks were agony. David had no idea if Sarah would agree to attempt restoration or proceed with divorce. He had to do the work of change without knowing if it would matter. But something shifted in him. The work he was doing, the counseling, the accountability, the character development, it was changing him regardless of outcome. He was becoming someone different. Not the serial cheater who'd lived a double life, but not yet the faithful husband he needed to be. He was in between, broken but rebuilding. Sarah called David on Christmas Eve. Can you come to the house? I've made a decision. David drove to Winnetka, his heart pounding. This was it. Sarah would either agree to attempt restoration or proceed with divorce. Either way, he had to accept it. Sarah met him at the door. Emma and Jacob were at her parents' house for the evening. They sat in the living room, the same room where David had confessed 7 weeks ago. I've spent 6 weeks thinking, praying, counseling, trying to decide what I can live with, Sarah began. And David, I want you to know this has been the hardest decision of my life. David nodded, afraid to speak. Part of me wants to divorce you, Sarah continued, to end this marriage and start over. You betrayed me for 7 years. You lied to my face thousands of times. You gaslit me, made me question my sanity, destroyed my self-worth. And then you let me believe it was my fault that I wasn't attractive enough, interesting enough, good enough. The damage you've done. I don't know if I'll ever fully recover from it. David's eyes filled with tears, but he remained silent. But, Sarah said, her voice softening slightly, I've also watched you these past 6 weeks. I've seen you do the work, the counseling, the confession, the job change, the honesty with the kids, and I believe your repentance is real. I believe Jesus actually did appear to you and show you what you've done. I believe you're genuinely trying to change. She paused, gathering herself. I've also been reading about forgiveness, about what it means biblically, and I've realized forgiveness doesn't mean what you did was okay. It doesn't mean I'm excusing it or forgetting it. Forgiveness means I'm choosing not to let your sin define the rest of my life. I'm choosing to release the debt so I can heal. Sarah, let me finish, she interrupted. I'm willing to try, to attempt restoration. But David, I need you to understand, this doesn't mean everything is fine. It doesn't mean I trust you. Trust has to be rebuilt, earned back over years. And it might never be what it was because what it was based on lies anyway. I understand, David said. I'm agreeing to intensive marriage counseling, to you moving back home eventually, but not immediately, to attempting to rebuild our marriage. But David, if you ever betray me again, if you lie about anything significant, if you revert to any of those patterns, I'm done. No second chances, no more counseling, just divorce. Do you understand? Yes, David said firmly. Sarah, I understand, and I promise you I'm never going back to that life. What Jesus showed me, what I felt experiencing your pain, I can't unsee that. I can't go back to being the person who could do that to you. We'll see, Sarah said. Time will tell. Actions will prove it, not words. She stood, and David stood with her. Merry Christmas, David, Sarah said quietly. I don't know what our future looks like, but I'm willing to find out. David carefully, tentatively, opened his arms for a hug. Sarah hesitated, then stepped forward, allowing the embrace. It was careful, guarded, nothing like the comfortable intimacy they'd once had. But it was a start. A year after Jesus appeared, David and Sarah stood together at their church, giving their testimony. A year ago, David said, his voice strong but humble, I was living a double life. For 7 years, I'd been systematically betraying my wife with serial infidelity. I'd lied thousands of times. I'd gaslit her, making her question her own sanity. I'd destroyed her trust and self-worth while she blamed herself for our failing marriage. He looked at Sarah, standing beside him. But Jesus Christ appeared to me in a hotel room and showed me what I'd done by making me experience it from my wife's perspective. He made me feel every moment of pain, every lie, every betrayal, and it destroyed me in the best way it destroyed the man who was capable of that betrayal and created space for someone different to emerge. Sarah took the microphone. When David confessed, I wanted to divorce him immediately. I had every right to. Biblically, legally, morally, adultery releases the innocent spouse from marriage bonds. But after weeks of prayer and counseling, I made a choice to attempt restoration. Not because I had to, but because I believed God was calling me to demonstrate the same grace He's shown me. That doesn't mean it was easy, Sarah continued. This year has been the hardest of my life. Learning to trust again, working through the pain, rebuilding intimacy. There were days I wanted to quit, days I wondered if I'd made the right choice. Days the hurt was so overwhelming I could barely function. But, she said, her voice becoming stronger, we're still here, still married, still rebuilding. And our marriage now is different than before. It's built on truth instead of lies, on genuine intimacy instead of surface appearances. We're not fully healed, but we're healing. David took the microphone back. If you're here, and you're being unfaithful emotionally, physically, digitally, hear this. You're destroying your spouse in ways you can't see. You're eroding their self-worth, their trust, their joy, and the lies you're telling yourself that it's not that bad, that they don't know so it doesn't hurt them, that you're just meeting your needs. Those lies are building a prison you'll eventually be trapped in. Stop now, David continued. Confess now, before you're discovered, before the damage is irreparable, before you lose everything. Yes, confession will be painful. Yes, your spouse may leave, but deception is guaranteed destruction. Truth is the only foundation for potential restoration, Sarah added. And if you're the betrayed spouse, if you're living in the confusion and pain of suspecting betrayal, you're not crazy. Trust your intuition, demand truth, and know that whatever you decide after you, have that truth. Whether you choose to forgive or to leave, you're not required to stay in a marriage built on lies. After the testimony, multiple people approached them. A man in his 50s. I've been having an affair for 2 years. I've been telling myself it's harmless. But hearing your story, I'm ending it tonight and confessing to my wife tomorrow. A woman in her 30s. My husband has been distant, and I've suspected cheating, but been afraid to confront it. You've given me courage to demand truth. A young couple, we're engaged. Hearing this makes us want to build our marriage on truth and accountability from the beginning. 2 years after Jesus appeared, David and Sarah sat on their back porch watching the sunset, their hands intertwined. How are you feeling? David asked. Better, Sarah said honestly. Not completely healed. I don't know if I'll ever be completely healed from what you did, but better, stronger, more hopeful about our future. I think about it every day, David admitted. What I did to you, the 7 years of betrayal. Sometimes the guilt is overwhelming. I know, Sarah said, but guilt that leads to continued change is good. What would worry me is if you forgot, if you became comfortable again, if you started thinking that was the old me without vigilance. I'll never be comfortable, David said. I'll never stop being vigilant. What Jesus showed me making me feel your pain from the inside, I'll carry that for the rest of my life. It keeps me humble, keeps me grateful, keeps me devoted to never becoming that person again. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Do you trust me? David asked. Sarah thought carefully. More than I did. Not completely yet. Maybe never completely the way I did before, because that trust was based on lies. But I trust you enough to stay. Enough to keep building. Enough to hope. That's enough, David said. That's more than I deserve. Yes, Sarah agreed. It is, but it's what I'm choosing to give. Not because you've earned it, but because that's what grace looks like. David's phone buzzed. A message from a man he was mentoring, someone who'd reached out after hearing their testimony. Day 90 of faithfulness to my wife. First time in 5 years I can say that. Thank you for being honest about your failure. It saved my marriage before I destroyed it like you almost did. David showed the message to Sarah. She smiled a real, genuine smile. That's why Jesus saved you, she said. Not just for us, but for them. Your failure, your transformation, it's bearing fruit in other marriages. Other families are being saved because you were honest about how low you went and how far grace reached to pull you back. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, they sat together, not the same couple who'd married 15 years ago, not the broken couple from 2 years ago, but something new. A couple who'd been through hell and chosen to rebuild rather than abandon, to forgive rather than simply condemn, to demonstrate grace rather than just justice. Adultery is one of the most devastating betrayals in human relationships. It's not just about the sexual act, it's about the lies, the deception, the systematic destruction of trust, the weaponizing of intimacy against the person who trusted you most. David's story is extreme. 7 years, 23 affairs, systematic deception, but the pattern is tragically common. The husband or wife who has an affair, the spouse who maintains emotional affairs at work, the person who uses dating apps while married, the systematic lying and gaslighting that makes the betrayed spouse question their own sanity. And the justifications are remarkably similar. My spouse doesn't understand me. We've grown apart. I have needs. It's just physical. What they don't know won't hurt them. I'll stop eventually. These are lies we tell ourselves to excuse sin, because the truth is simpler and more brutal. We want pleasure, excitement, ego gratification more than we want to honor our vows. We're willing to destroy our spouse's peace, trust, and self-worth to get what we want. What saved David? Divine intervention that made him experience his wife's suffering from her perspective. Sometimes God saves us by devastating us first, by forcing us to see what we've done without the comfortable distance of self-justification. If you're being unfaithful in any form, physically, emotionally, digitally, hear this. You're not just sinning against your spouse. You're sinning against God, who designed marriage as a picture of his covenant love. You're destroying your own soul. You're building a prison of lies that will eventually collapse. Stop now. Confess now. Before you're discovered. Before the damage becomes irreparable. Yes, confession will be painful. Your spouse may leave. Your family may be broken. But deception guarantees destruction. Truth is the only foundation for possible restoration. And if you're the betrayed spouse living in confusion, suspecting betrayal, feeling crazy because your intuition screams one thing, while your spouse swears another, hear this. You're not crazy. Trust your instincts. Demand truth. And know that whatever you decide after you have that truth, whether you choose to forgive like Sarah or to leave, both are valid responses to betrayal. The Bible is clear about adultery. It's grounds for divorce. If your spouse has been unfaithful, you're released from your vows. You can choose to forgive and attempt restoration, but you're not required to. God offers you the option to leave without guilt. Sarah's choice to forgive was beautiful, but it's not mandatory. Some marriages survive infidelity. Many don't. Both outcomes can honor God if they're built on truth rather than continued deception. The scandal of grace is that it reaches even serial adulterers like David, even people who've betrayed systematically for years, even those who've gaslit, manipulated, and destroyed trust. God's mercy is larger than our sin, but it requires genuine repentance, not just regret at being caught. David's repentance was genuine because Jesus made him feel the consequences of his sin, because he confessed before being discovered, because he did the work of change regardless of outcome. That's real repentance, not just sorrow for consequences, but genuine grief over sin itself. If you're in David's position caught in infidelity, facing consequences, don't try to minimize or manage the damage. Confess fully, accept all consequences, do the work of change. And understand that your spouse's forgiveness, if it comes, is grace you don't deserve and should treasure forever. And if you're beginning your marriage young, hopeful, believing it won't happen to you, build accountability now. Practice transparency now. Create a culture of honesty now. Don't wait until temptation is overwhelming. Build guardrails before you need them. Jesus appeared in a hotel room because a wife's prayers reached heaven, because 7 years of systematic betrayal was approaching a point of no return, because one more day might have been too late. Don't wait for divine intervention. Choose faithfulness now. Choose honesty now. Choose honor now. Because the alternative, the pain David inflicted and then had to feel, is a price too high for temporary pleasure. Your spouse trusted you with their heart. Honor that trust. It's sacred.
Subscribe to Tales of God's Grace for more true miracles and stories of redemption. Your support helps us reach and restore families around the world. Don't forget to tag a friend and share this video, so together we can spread faith, love, and healing where it's needed most.